In 2007, the world's biggest passenger plane touched down for the first time in commercial service. 555 seats, 2 full decks. A machine so large it needed its own infrastructure just to exist. Airbus called it the future of aviation. Airlines around the world lined up to buy it. And America didn't order a single one. Not Delta, not United, not American Airlines. Zero. But here's what nobody talks about. America didn't just ignore the A380. Without spending a dollar, without placing a single order, the United States effectively killed it. Here's how that happened. To understand what America did, you first need to understand what Airbus was actually building. By the late 1990s, air travel was exploding. More people were flying than ever before. Major hub airports like London Heathrow, Tokyo Narita, and Frankfurt were hitting their absolute limits. Runways were full, gates were packed. There was simply no room to add more flights. Airbus looked at this problem and came up with what seemed like an obvious solution. If you can't run more flights, make each flight carry more people. So they built the A380, a plane so big it could move 555 passengers in standard configuration, or up to 850 if an airline stripped out the premium cabins. The logic was clean. Fewer flights, more passengers per flight, less congestion. They spent $25 billion developing it. To break even, they needed to sell roughly 420 aircraft. They were projecting 1,900 sales over 20 years. On paper, it was a bulletproof business case. There was just one problem. They built it around a version of aviation that America had already moved away from, and the rest of the world just hadn't realized it yet. While Airbus was drafting blueprints for the world's biggest plane, American Airlines were quietly running one of the most ruthless experiments in aviation history. And it had nothing to do with bigger planes. It started in 1978. America deregulated its airline industry. Before that, routes and prices were controlled by the government. Airlines competed on service, not price. After deregulation, everything changed. Any airline could fly anywhere and charge whatever they wanted. Competition became brutal. Margins got razor thin. This created something that didn't exist anywhere else in the world: the American passenger. Someone so price-sensitive, so obsessed with convenience, that airlines had to completely reinvent how they thought about routes. European passengers could be funneled through massive hubs and charged premium prices because there weren't many alternatives. American passengers had options, lots of them, and they used them. So American Airlines started asking a completely different question. Not, how do we move the most people through the fewest airports? But, how do we get each passenger exactly where they want to go, as directly as possible and as cheaply as possible? That one shift in thinking made the A380 completely irrelevant to the American market before Airbus had even finished building it. Here's a way to think about why the A380 never had a chance in America. Picture Kansas City, about 2 million people in the metro area. A solid airport, decent size, right in the heart of the country, perfectly middle America. Now ask yourself, can you fill an A380 flying from Kansas City to London? The A380, in standard configuration, seats around 525 people. To fill that plane from Kansas City to London, you wouldn't just need Kansas City passengers. You'd need to funnel people in from St. Louis, Indianapolis, Nashville, maybe Cincinnati, all connecting through a major hub first, then boarding the A380 together. That's the hub-and-spoke model. Collect passengers from everywhere, concentrate them in one place, then move them in massive batches. American Airlines looked at that model and saw a problem immediately. Those same Kansas City passengers didn't want connections. They wanted direct flights. And they were willing to pay a little extra for them. So instead of buying A380s and running them hub to hub, American Airlines started buying smaller, longer-range planes and flying them directly from mid-sized cities straight to international destinations. Kansas City to London, Nashville to Amsterdam, Austin to Tokyo. Routes that would never work with 525 seats worked perfectly fine with 250. Here's where America didn't just ignore the A380. It actively pulled the floor out from under it. Back in 1985, flying across an ocean required a 4-engine plane. The rules were strict. You had to stay within 60 minutes of an airport at all times in case an engine failed. Lose one engine on a 4-engine plane, you still had 3. The math worked. But then engines got extraordinarily reliable, statistically remarkable, and American aviation regulators, the FAA, started paying attention. Through the 1980s and 1990s, the FAA began loosening the rules for twin-engine planes flying long distances. By 2007, they approved something called ETOPS 330. The number matters. 330 minutes. That's how far a twin-engine plane could now fly from the nearest airport. What this meant in practice was devastating for the A380. A Boeing 787 with just two engines could now fly the same oceanic routes that previously required a four-engine giant like the 747 or the A380. The entire engineering justification for a massive four-engine super jumbo had just evaporated. And it was American regulators who signed off on it. Airbus saw this coming. They had their own twin-engine long-range planes, the A330 and later the A350. But they had already committed $25 billion to the A380. There was no turning back. While Airbus was going bigger, Boeing was watching American Airlines very carefully. And soft was a market that didn't want bigger. It wanted smarter. So Boeing built the 787 Dreamliner, smaller than the A380, more fuel efficient, designed specifically for the point-to-point routes that American Airlines were pioneering. Boeing's pitch was simple. People want to get from where they are to where they want to be with as few stops as possible. The 787 made that possible on routes the A380 could never touch. Boeing sold over 1,500 Dreamliners. Airbus sold 251 A380s. But here's the part that really stings for Airbus. Between 2005 and 2015, American Airlines ordered over 1,400 new aircraft, 737s, Airbus A320, Boeing 787s. They bought everything Airbus made, except the A380, and every single one of those orders was a direct vote against the philosophy the A380 was built on. American Airlines weren't just refusing to buy the A380, they were funding its competition. There was one airline that made Airbus believe the A380 could still work. Emirates. In 2001, before the plane had even flown, Emirates placed an order for 58 A380s, with options for 90 more. The biggest aircraft order in history at the time. Airbus breathed a sigh of relief, but Emirates was a special case. Dubai sits at a geographic sweet spot, within 8 hours flying time of about 2/3 of the world's population. Emirates built their entire operation around one hub, pulling passengers from everywhere and connecting them everywhere else. The A380's massive capacity was perfect for those hub-to-hub mega routes. The problem was, Airbus started designing the A380 around Emirates geography, not American geography, not European geography. One airline, one hub, one very specific way of running an airline. And when Emirates eventually slowed down their orders in 2019, there was nobody left to pick up the slack. Airbus announced the end of the A380 program that same year. Emirates bought 123 of the 251 A380s ever built, nearly half. One airline kept an entire program alive, and when they stepped back, the whole thing collapsed. Even if an American airline had wanted A380s, there was one final wall they would have hit. Infrastructure. The A380 needs special gates, dual-level boarding bridges to handle both decks simultaneously. Without them, boarding and deplaning an A380 takes so long it destroys your turnaround time. JFK had 4 of these gates, LAX had 6, Chicago O'Hare had 2. Compare that to a Boeing 737, which can park at virtually any gate at any airport in the country. Here's the math that made American airline executives shake their heads. A 737 can land, offload passengers, get cleaned, refueled, and back in the air in about 45 minutes. An A380's minimum turnaround is around 2 hours. During peak travel times, that one A380 gate could have handled 4 separate 737 flights, potentially moving more total passengers with far more scheduling flexibility. American airports were built around speed and frequency. The A380 needed patience and volume. Those two things never lined up. So here's the full picture. America deregulated its airlines in 1978 and created the most price-sensitive, convenience-obsessed passengers on the planet. Passengers, the A380, was fundamentally unsuited to serve. American regulators approved ETOPS technology that made twin-engine planes capable of flying any route in the world, eliminating the need for 4-engine super jumbos. American airports were built around fast turnarounds and high frequency, the exact opposite of what the A380 required. and American manufacturers built the 787 Dreamliner, a plane that did everything American Airlines needed and sold 6 times more units than the A380 ever managed. Airbus needed roughly 420 sales to break even. They needed American orders to get there. Without them, the program was always going to fall short. America never banned the A380, never publicly criticized it, never lobbied against it. They simply built a version of aviation that had no room for it, and then exported that version of aviation to the rest of the world. The A380 wasn't killed by a rival. It wasn't killed by a recession. It was killed by 330 million Americans who just wanted a direct flight.